I started training for CBT Nuggets in 2003. As I look back, I go, wow, it's a lot of years. It's a decade of my life. And yet it doesn't feel that way. It's going so fast, and I feel just the same as I did back then. So I guess it's time goes faster and faster, right? So over the years, I get a lot of questions in the Cisco world, like how do I of course how do I configure something and something, but one of the common questions I get is, well, how do I get started in the world of Cisco? How do I get a job in the world of Cisco? How do I get started in the field of technology? I mean, all these kind of things. And I've put together a lot of, I guess I could call them canned answers. I mean, they're like thoughts in my mind of this is the best advice I could give you. But then I've had a number of people that say, well, how did you get started? And I think, well, it's nothing like my canned answers. It's nothing like the best advice I can give. I just kind of, how did I get here? I don't know. So I thought what I would do is put together a nugget that is my journey into the Cisco certification world. It's a little weird to do. It's almost like Jeremy Raw. It's like it's kind of weird to do a nugget like this because I don't usually like getting into the personal side of things, but it's like to do something like this, I had to. It would be weird to just say, oh, there I am in Cisco without giving you any background. So let me draw a line on this chart. Shoop, right there, Y2K. Year 2000 is when I got into Cisco. Before then, let me give you the flyby of Jeremy before that world. Technology has always been an interest to me. From the minute my dad brought home a Timex Sinclair computer from a conference. He got it free for going to this conference. They're like, oh, here's a free computer. I mean, you actually hooked up a cassette tape player, like an audio cassette, and that was how you played your programs to this. And so he was interested in computers, and he ended up buying a Commodore Amiga 1000, which was like, whoa, that computer was way ahead of its time. So he got into this world of BBSs with I think he started with a 1200 baud modem, and I just watched him. He's my dad. I'm like trying to figure out what he's doing, and I'm watching him. I'm like, this is pretty cool. You dial up, all these people. It's like, think of BBSs, bulletin board systems, as the internet before there was one. And so he was dialing up all these different places and trading files and leaving messages, and I'm like, oh, this is great. So I, as his son, get into that. I'm dialing up, and my dream was to run my own. So eventually my parents bought me a 9600 baud practical peripherals external LCD display. It was crazy. It was one of the most amazing purchases ever. Modem, and they got me a phone line, and there I was, receiving calls. I ran my own BBS. So I always had this technology bent, and so when I looked for a job, I naturally gravitated to technology. And so I guess before I even made this chart, I was at department stores selling computers, thinking I knew a lot more than I did. But who could tell me different back then? I was ignorant. And so I'm selling computers. Eventually landed a company called MicroAge. And MicroAge, they were actually contracted by Apple and Compaq. Now, Compaq is no more. They're gone. Apple, I mean, you guys know who Apple is, but I think of Apple as like these mountains of technology. They used to be massive. Is like, every school that you went to, Apple computers everywhere, every job, Apple was the computer. And then, somewhere, I don't know why or how, but they just went downhill quick. I mean, to the point of like nobody wants an Apple and all that. So right here, that's where the iPod came out and kind of resurrected the company and all that saga. So I was right here, right in the middle of that mountain. And my job initially there was to take credit card numbers. When Apple was one of the first companies to charge for tech support, so people would call. And I was the guy who said, well, before you can speak to a technician, let me get your credit card number. So I got yelled at a lot. And while people were yelling, I was looking at the Apple computer and trying to figure it out and playing with it. I'm like, I can do this. And they had all these training manuals at MicroAge that I could use to learn. And so before long, they promoted me out of credit card into real tech support. And so I began where a lot of you began, which is on the phones, taking tech support calls, telling people to re-image their computers that had, no business re-imaging their computer. I just didn't know the answer. So anyway, all the side notes beside. At the same time, I'm going to college for a computer science degree. Why? Because that's all anybody told me. Every time I talk to a counselor at the college campus, I talk to anybody, and they're like, "Oh, well, if you want to do anything real in the technology world, you got to be a programmer." And oh my word, if I would have only known, there was other other fields. And I know a lot of people out there just don't know that there are other things than computer programming, because I hated it. I would go to the classes. I had no relevance for it. Okay, this is an if then while loop. Huh? Why? Okay, variable X. Well, I don't, like it just it. I didn't see the point. There was no real world application. This was before there really was a common internet that everybody connected to. So I'm just like, okay, why would I want to do it? Like, it just didn't make sense. I didn't care about it. Thus, I didn't do well at it. So 3 years into the degree, finals week began a series of misfortunate events in my life, to where I was in a motorcycle accident, followed by a high-speed car accident the month following. So essentially left me brain damaged and I laugh, but seriously, and unable to complete the computer science degree. So after 3 years, I stopped, and after much rehab and miracles, etc., in my life, I end up back at MicroRage, now working on an assembly line, building computers. And that was one of the things is we would build them, we would put Windows NT on them, ship them off to a company, so the company would just have to unbox them and it'd be ready for their system. And so I show up to work one day, and someone goes, "Oh, Jeremy, you're supposed to be in class." And I go, "Oh, where?" And they go, "Across the street." And okay, and so I run across the street, and there I walk into my first MCSE class. Now, looking back, wasn't supposed to be there. It was actually, they scheduled my department, but not me, to go there. And it was actually 2 classes along in the track. So it was way above my head. But I'm sitting there in this class watching this instructor who's talking about users and groups and global and local and domains. And I'm like, oh my word, I never even knew this side of the technology field existed. Like, this is interesting to me. It was over my head, but boy, was it interesting. And I was just like, man. And I realized as I'm sitting there watching this guy razzle and dazzle me with domains and trusts and all the stuff that Microsoft had, I'm sitting there in the chair just going, I bet that guy never forgets. I bet you he never forgets all this stuff he's talking about, because he's talking about it all the time. So, it's like sneak peek into Jeremy's motivation to get into teaching. I didn't want to forget. I really didn't have much like previous experience or anything like that. I was just like, I bet you he doesn't forget anything. So I get back and they're like, I can't believe you didn't tell us you weren't supposed to be at that class, and we're never sending you to another class. I mean, it was just not good. And I didn't know. They just said go to class. So no more funding from the company to take classes. So I started buying them myself. I said, well, this is so interesting to me. I want to start going to these classes. So I start buying these classes. And so I'm going to the training company one day. I know you're wondering how are you getting? I'm getting there. You just want the raw Jeremy of how I got into technology, because I will tell you, I've heard more stories that are just whacked out like this. This is how it happened. I walked into the training company to take a certification exam. I still remember it was the 688 exam, Microsoft TCP/IP. Had no idea about subnetting and all that back then, but was ready for the test. And so I was waiting for the test to begin. Waiting for the test taker, and I talked to the receptionist and I said, what does it take to get a job teaching at a company like this? And the receptionist looked at me and she goes, oh, you know what? We're actually looking for trainers. And she said, let me call the manager. And, I'm like, whoa, hey, well, no, I'm like, back, no. And so she calls the manager. Manager comes in and he goes, oh, so I hear you want to be a trainer. And I said, well, I was just curious, what does it take? I mean, how do you, and he goes, tell you what. You pass this exam, because by then my seat had freed up and I was going in for the exam. He goes, you pass this exam, you're hired. I'm not kidding. So I'm like, huh? What? And I can fill in some of the back details later. So I go in to take this test, shaking, not only because of the normal test nerves, but this is like a job interview. I'm going in to take this test, and I pass, and I come out, and he goes, well, you're hired. And so now let me fill in some of the back details. You're like, this is crazy. It is. I found out later that this company does this all the time. They hire anybody, and they throw them in front of a room, and if the person survives and does well, great. Otherwise, you're fired. That's pretty much the game. So he goes, well, your first class is going to be in a couple weeks. You're going to be teaching US West technicians about this up-and-coming technology. It's called DSL. And how to install a network card and all. And he said, well, here's the book that we've created to do this. So go ahead and study that, and you'll be ready to teach. So I'm like, oh my word. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to prepare and all this kind of stuff. So end up in front of a room, sweating, not ever doing really any public speaking before, looking at the second hand on the clock as the people are going through their introductions, and saying to myself, if the minute hand reaches the 10, I had this mark, and I still feel this way, I am walking out of this room and I am never setting foot in the classroom again. So, long story short, someone asked me a question, and another person asked me a question, and it was literally questions is how I taught my first class, teaching these U.S. West technicians, and thus, there I was. So I left U.S. West technician support and started teaching Microsoft, and then moved into Novell, and then fill in, this is blah, blah, blah. Years in the Microsoft world, got into consulting, moved between various training companies, all this kind of stuff. Y2K. I'm a Microsoft certified system engineer for Windows NT in 2000, and certified Novell engineer for NetWare 4 and NetWare 5, and I want to try something new. So I talked to a company called KnowledgeNet who contacted me. They're looking for trainers for this new e-learning concept. And KnowledgeNet is no more. But back then, it was like if you had a .com in your name, like millions of dollars. And they were like, hey, you hire on for us, we'll give you tons of stock options, you'll be rich, and all that. That didn't work. But I said, well, tell you what, if I'm going to come teach, I really want to get into the world of Cisco. So they said, great, come on over. And so I came over, and they said, okay, you're going to start studying Cisco, get your CCNA. So I'm studying. Now, back then, in the year 2000, the CCNA was nothing. I mean, it was just a series of multiple choice questions. It was one exam. It wasn't two. And I was good at reading books and being able to recite information. That was a talent of mine. And so I was able to pass the exam within a month of hiring on at KnowledgeNet, and knew nothing. I could pass the exam, but really, if you asked me to configure a device from scratch, I'd be like, I can change the host name. It was very, very sketchy. And so the month after, they go, okay, you got your CCNA. Why don't you get your CCNP? So I got the entire CCNP in a month. And now that when I tell people that, they're like, man, you're so smart. No, I'm not. It's back then, you could have done it too. If you were paid to study, if you were given 40 hours a week to study, and you had the caliber of exam, I guarantee you, you'd be just fine passing those exams. So the month after that, they're ramping up. I'm starting to teach a few classes, but they go, okay, well, we've got some extra funds. This was before the crash of the .com companies, and they said, we have some extra funds. Why don't you go take your CCIE? And so me thinking, the CCIE is just like all the rest. I was like, okay, sure, yeah, okay. And then they're like, okay, well, we'll get your plane tickets. And I was like, huh, plane tickets? That's you can see my underline, absolute. I was okay. Well, I think okay. There's a qualification exam. I passed the qualification exam again, multiple choice. Read the book, pass the exam. End up sitting in San Jose. Walking into my first CCI exam, looking at the rack of equipment and going, wow, I've never seen one of those before. And that's the first time you're not meant to be there. And just open the book, they're like, okay, begin, click, click, the timers started, and I open the book and I'm just like, I am no way. And so it was literally 8 hours of just playing around on Cisco devices I've never touched before. Of course, flying out of having the hopes, I'm like, maybe I passed, maybe somehow I scrape by, man, get home, dismal failure. So I take a year of life, and all this time I'm starting to get into the Cisco world, teaching all the CCNA and CCNP classes, and really getting it now. Really starting to understand and fill in a lot of the gaps by doing it, by having to create scenarios, build this, starting to consult a little bit for people that are setting up networks, and really starting to get it. So I've got a year of teaching, studying, consulting between attempt 1 and 2. So I schedule the exam the second time. Fly out to Cisco, take the exam, just feel awesome going through it. I'm like, okay, I've got it. It makes sense. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Finish the exam early. I finished the CCIE, probably about half an hour early. And I'm like, okay, well, now's my chance to go through and I guess test some things. And I'm feeling good. So I get out of the exam. I'm calling family and friends. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I know I passed. Obviously I don't know until I get home. and they post my score report. So it's one of those nights in infamy. I'll always remember. I woke up literally at 4 in the morning the next morning, just staring at the ceiling. And I was like, I wonder if they have my score report posted. So I came into the office and pulled up the score report online. And the CCIE, in all its confidential ways, doesn't tell you a thing. I just logged in, social security number. It's like, you fail. And I'm like, what? I'm F5, F5. By then my wife had snuck in behind me, and she's like, what are you doing up? And I was like, I totally failed. I don't understand. And that's why I'm saying confusing. I still, to this day, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And so I'm like, F5, refresh. I'm trying to understand why. And I'm like, there has to be a mistake. And so I call Cisco the next day, and I'm like, I know there has to be I know I passed. And they said, well, I'll tell you what, I can't even remember how much it was, but they're like, it was like something like $200. Like, tell you what, we will regrade your exam by hand for an extra $200. And I'm like, done. I was like, put the credit card number on the line, grade it by hand. They come back an hour later, and they're like, I'm sorry, you still fail. But your score went up by like 20 points. And I'm like, what? That by then I'm like, conspiracy. They're just after my money, and oh man, it was a bad time of my life. I'm like, forget Cisco. I'm done with this. So after all that settles down, I'm like, okay, I did not spend a year of my life studying this, trying to get this, just to give up now. I was like, I don't know why I didn't pass. This has been miserable, but I've got to try it again. So a month later, literally with no studying at all, I think I did some practice exams, like practice labs, but really no real studying. A month later, I go take the exam. This time, it's very wise not to call anybody until you know you pass. And I get out, and same feeling. I still feel good, but I don't call anybody. I fly home, and by the time I had flown home back to Arizona, I logged in, and they're like, success. You pass. You've got your CCIE. And, there's... I can't even tell you the feeling. I mean, people are like, oh, man, were you thrilled? No, I was just exhausted. It's like running a marathon, and you reach the end, you're like, I am done. Thump, and you just hit the ground. You're like, you're happy you finished. You know that you're going to be talking about this in a couple weeks, but man, right now you just hurt. And so that was the success of CCIE. So, and I should say, between attempt 2 and attempt 3, in that month, it looks like more than a month because of the spread, but nonetheless, I began teaching, writing books. So Pearson, who's a big giant publishing company, got my name from actually a book I had created years ago, Microsoft ISA Server 2000. I wrote that back in 1998. And so they got my name from there, and at that point I started writing some exam cram books. And Pearson, being the giant company that they are, does exam cram. They do Cisco Press. I mean, there's a lot of publishing companies. So that's where I started writing books. Again, all of these. So as I'm trying to put all these pieces together. Actually, hang on. I don't want to go there yet. Let me put that thought at the end. Let me finish this journey. So began writing books. Started after CCIE. Started getting into the other technologies like voice and security. Back then was called the CCVP and CCSP certifications. Got into those, but there was just a huge demand, and still is, for voice over IP. So that's where I started getting specialized, and renewed my CCIE certification by passing the CCIE voice written. Now, despite I've had people out there like, I heard you're like a 9-time CCIE. I only have my CCIE currently today in routing and switching. People ask me all the time if I'm going to get another CCIE in voice or security, and I would say maybe if I really see a need for it, maybe. But I mean, this point right here was I'm married, no kids. Now I have 4 children and more to come. So it's like when I started thinking about a CCIE, I'm like, wow, I can't just go in my closet for hours and hours and hours at a time to study. It would be much more difficult. So I really have to see a need for that. But I have enough in voice and security that I'm like, oh, I feel totally comfortable. And when you get one CCIE, I mean, you really. I would say the biggest thing the CCIE gives you is a lot of confidence. I mean, you really feel like not only do I have a good understanding of whatever topic I've got my CCIE in, but you lose the fear of new stuff. You're kind of like, I've gone into so many new things now that I know I can figure it out. I just need some time and I need to play around with it. So around 2004, got into Cisco consulting, and that was where I went full-time Cisco consulting. And I mean, that was what I did, and just got what I still don't get this. My brothers are big gamers, and they it used to be, I don't know if this phrase is still around, but on the shooter games, they're like, "Oh man, you got pwned," and I was like, "What's that mean? That's not even a real word." And they're like, "That means you just got destroyed, like they own you." I'm like, why don't you just say you got owned? But nonetheless, I digress. So got into Cisco consulting and got pwned into where, that's where I was like, oh man, you know what? Just understanding the configuration of things is not all you need. You need to understand things like notification and outage windows, and oh yeah, don't type that during the business day. And I mean, the amount of ignorant mistakes I made in 2004 is absurd. Wow, talk about having a real world drop in the pond at that point. So started a blog at the same time, 2004, called Cisco Blog. And I don't know why I put that on. It's just, I guess, a fun story now. But ran that for 4 years, I think in 2008 or 9. Cisco contacted me and said, you can't use that domain name anymore. And I said, well, why not? Because by then it was in the tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of hits every week, just a lot. And I had those little Google ads, and those things can make some money. And I was actually making a decent income off of Cisco Blog, and I'm like, just off that, people that click the ads. And I was like, well, you can't take that away. And they go, actually, did you know in the certification agreement, like clause B 59A6, they're like, you cannot use any Cisco trademark without authorization, or else we'll strip all your certifications from you. And I said, oh, so if I keep using Cisco Blog, you're going to take all my certifications? And they're like, yes. And I was like, well, there's the end of that. So I posted on the website. I said, it's been fun. Thanks. And Cisco's taking the site from me, but thanks. I didn't say anything derogatory, but man, the flurry that it caused, and it ended up going on Cisco's Facebook page. Like, I can't believe you guys are doing it. And so now Cisco Legal contacted me initially, but then Cisco Customer Relations contacted me later. They're like, oh, what can we do? And I was like, I don't know. How about let me keep CiscoBlog.com? And they're like, well, we can't do it. I mean, again, let me boil the long story short. I found out later that I guess there was some other company that was using Cisco in their name, selling illegal or kind of like knockoff Cisco equipment, RAM that was not authorized, but they had Cisco in the name, so it looked like Cisco. So they got busted, and they said, well, wait a sec, that guy's doing it at CiscoBlog.com. So I was kind of like shrapnel. Like, Cisco Blog died because of the explosion of shrapnel on whatever website got nailed originally by Cisco for doing all kinds of fraudulent stuff. But nonetheless, I got a free t-shirt. And now my blog is called TechCert, TEKCERT.com. And I do that with another guy named Adam, who's just a great guy. So it's kind of like, and there it is. What's next? I don't know. I started a company 3 years ago called School Desk and Simply Easy IT. That it's kind of like it does IT outsourcing and things like that. And so where do I go? I love training. I know I'm always going to do it, and I just whatever interesting technology is there, that's where I'll go. But the future is always so fuzzy, so it's hard for me to even fathom that. But let me go back to a point I was going to make just a few minutes ago, and that is, what can you take away from this? I've laid my life of technology out before you. What can you grab from it? Well, one thing that I've seen is that when you are in a position, there's no replacing just a genuine joy, enthusiasm, passion for what you're doing, and it's contagious, and people will realize, wow, you're really here for something more than just a paycheck. I mean, if someone were to come here and be like, down to this old Jeremy doing tech support and say, Jeremy, would you do this for free? I would laugh. I would say, no, what are you thinking? You're crazy. Absolutely not. Why would I do that? because back then it was just a paycheck. I was going and I was doing tech support. I didn't really care so much. I just had to show up at this time and left at this time. But now, if somebody asked me, they would say, "Would you do this for free?" I mean, it's a loaded question, but kind of. I do it right now. I mean, I come home. There's weekends where I'm like, you know what? I just want to re-VLAN my house, or I want to move my IT room over there because that'd be cool. It's like these I want to set up a new little NAS drive and put all my stuff on there and replicate that I mean, it's really interesting. It's intriguing to me. And so when you have that interest and when you're really excited about it, you'll be in a meeting and they'll be like, well, what do you think about that? I mean, even if you're not in a technology related job, you could come to the management and be like, hey, I've got some ideas for the website. I think da 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 da. Or how are you routing to? Maybe we could set up like a redundant internet connection. Do you think that'd be good? I mean, if you're really excited and you're really enthusiastic about it, they may shoot you down. They may be like, absolutely not. That's crazy. But they'll at least get the fact that, man, this guy he's really interested in this. He's really excited about it. I wonder, he's here for a little bit more, and that will carry you a long way. Now, obviously, if it's genuine, it's like, well, I was thinking, trying to get showing up on the radar and things like that. But anyway, so second thing, in my career, I think almost every job I've had has come from some relationship I've had. Maybe the first couple was from a newspaper ad, but after that, it was like, I know a guy who knows a guy who said, such and such and such. So never undervalue relationships and the doors that they can open. I mean, it's not like you're in relationships to open doors, but wow, as you gain relationships in your career with coworkers, with management, with things like that. I mean, a lot of times you will see, a manager leaves and goes to another company, and he's like, hey, come over here. This is great, and those doors are now open. So huge thing there. Finally, I have seen a lot of doors open for people through internships, to where they come to a company and they're like, you know what, I don't have anything going right now, but tell you what, I will absolutely come here. Maybe it's after hours, maybe it's from 1 to 4 on Tuesday, Thursdays, maybe it's whenever, and I just want to work for free. I'll recable something, I'll go install some equipment, I'll do some grunt work, whatever. I just want to gain some experience and gain a reference, and if you do a really good job, if you actually show up when you say you're going to show up and you're doing a great job, I mean, you walk away, I would say at least with a name and number, to where you go to another place and they're like, oh yeah, that guy's awesome. You'd be crazy. I would say at best, I've seen so many times where somebody interns at a company. They're like, hey, I'm just here to volunteer and I'll just help out in the evenings, on weekends and stuff like that. And before long, that company is like, wow, that person has become so valuable. Like we can't lose them. We've got to hire them. And again, doors open that were not previous there. I've seen people intern on weekends for a year. Like they have their normal job day to day. I'm thinking of one guy in particular, and he literally volunteered every weekend for a year just to come in and do whatever. He would just, recable some stuff, re-image some computers, do that kind of thing. And everybody got to know him so well. It was like people would think he worked there, and he didn't even work there. But the company was like, well, this is a no-brainer. We are absolutely hiring this guy. And now the guy is extremely successful in the technology field. So again, just some weird thoughts I'm having based off of on where I've come from. I hope that you can grab something from this and use it to advance your career, especially if you're just getting your foot in the door in the world of technology. All right, well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.